She was just a stranger's child, desperate and afraid. He was the Mafia boss who'd sworn never to care about anyone. But when she ran to him crying, "They're beating Mommy," he broke every rule he'd ever made and discovered a truth that shattered his world. The thunder hit so hard it rattled the whiskey glasses on Adriano Moretti's desk. He didn't flinch. Men like him had stopped fearing storms a long time ago. What they feared was silence, the kind that came before someone decided to put a bullet in your back. "I'm telling you, the shipment's clean," Marco insisted, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool October air. "The cops got nothing." Adriano leaned back in his leather chair, the dim light of the upstairs office casting shadows across his scarred jaw. At 42, he looked older. The kind of older that came from carrying bodies instead of years. "Marco, if you're lying to me, they won't find enough of you to fill a coffee cup." The other three men around the table shifted uncomfortably. This was how meetings went in the Moretti family. Business mixed with barely concealed threats, everyone smiling with their hands near their guns. Another crack of thunder. Then something else. Something that didn't belong. The sound of the cafe doors downstairs slamming open. Adriano's hand moved to the Glock on his hip. His lieutenant, Rocco, was already standing, pulling his weapon. In their world, an unlocked door at midnight meant one thing. You had about 5 seconds to shoot first or die trying. "Boss, you want me to?" "Wait," Adriano held up his hand. Because that's when they heard it. Not the heavy footsteps of a rival crew. Not the coordinated breach of a police raid. A child.
Crying.
"Help. Please, somebody help." The voice was high and desperate, echoing up the narrow staircase from the cafe below. A little girl by the sound of it, maybe 6 or 7 years old. Adriano's men looked at each other, confused. This wasn't protocol. This wasn't anything they'd trained for. "They're hurting my mommy," the voice screamed again, closer now. Small feet pounding on the stairs. "Please, please, they're killing her." The office door burst open. Every gun in the room came up, fingers on triggers. Then everyone froze. She was tiny, absolutely tiny. Barefoot, wearing a pink nightgown that was torn at the shoulder and soaked through from the rain. Her blonde hair stuck to her face in wet tangles. Blood on her hands. Not hers, Adriano realized immediately. Someone else's. The little girl stood there, shaking, her brown eyes wild with terror. She looked at the 4 armed men pointing weapons at her and did something that would haunt Adriano for the rest of his life. She ran straight to him. Not to the door. Not away from the danger.
To him.
Her small body crashed into his legs, her fingers grabbing his pants with desperate strength. "You have to help her. They're beating Mommy. She told me to run. She told me to find." She choked on her tears, gasping for air. Hey, Adriano's voice came out rough. He wasn't good with kids. He'd made damn sure he'd never had to be. His hands hovered awkwardly over her shaking shoulders. "Slow down. Where's your mother?" "The motel." She looked up at him, and something in her eyes reached through all the walls he'd built around himself. "The one by the bridge. There were men, bad men, they had guns and they were hitting her, and there was so much blood, and she screamed at me to run." "Rocco, get the cars," Adriano barked. "Boss, this could be a setup." "Some kind of." Did I stutter?
"Get
the cars." The little girl was still clutching him, her whole body trembling. Adriano awkwardly patted her head, his massive hand practically covering her entire skull. "Listen, kid, we're gonna go get your mom, okay? But I need you to tell me." "Her name's Isabella," the girl whispered, and then she said something that stopped Adriano's heart cold. "Isabella Moretti." The room went silent. Even the thunder outside seemed to pause. Marco's mouth fell open. Rocco's gun arm dropped to his side. Every man in that room knew the story. The wife their boss had loved and lost 8 years ago. The woman who'd vanished one night with divorce papers and a promise to never look back. The one name Adriano Moretti never allowed anyone to speak. Adriano stared down at the little girl. Really looked at her for the first time. The brown eyes. The sharp angle of her chin. The way she tilted her head when she was scared. His eyes.
His chin.
His habits. Oh God, he breathed. How old are you? 7.5, she sniffled. Please, mister, we have to go now. She's hurt really bad. 7.5 years old. He did the math in his head, counted back. The timeline matched. The last night he'd seen Isabella, before she'd left him. Before she'd disappeared into thin air despite all his resources, all his connections, all his desperate searching. She'd been pregnant. And she'd never told him. What's your name? His voice came out strangled. Emma. She wiped her nose on his expensive suit jacket. Emma Moretti. That's my mommy's name too. She said we're Morettis and Morettis don't give up, so I ran and ran until I found. She paused, her tear-filled eyes studying his face with sudden confusion. Why do you look like my daddy in the picture? Adriano couldn't breathe.
Couldn't think.
For the first time in 20 years, since he'd put his first body in the ground, he felt something close to fear. He had a daughter, a little girl who'd just run through hell to find help, a child he'd never known existed. And her mother, his Isabella, was dying in some motel room while he stood here frozen like an idiot. Marco, you're driving. Rocco, bring everyone. Everyone, he scooped Emma up with one arm, ignoring her surprised squeak. And someone called Doc Stevens. Tell him to prep for emergency trauma. Boss, if this is Isabella, if your enemies know about her, then they just declared war. Adriano's voice dropped to something dark and cold, the tone that made men beg for mercy. And they're going to learn why you don't touch what's mine. He was already moving down the stairs. Emma clutched against his chest, his men scrambling to follow. Outside, the rain hammered down, but Adriano barely noticed. He could feel his daughter's heart beating against his ribs, rapid and terrified. Hold on tight, Emma, he said quietly, strapping her into the back of his Mercedes. Your daddy's got you now. She looked up at him with those heartbreaking eyes. You're really my daddy? Yeah, kid, he checked his gun, chambered around. I really am. And I promise you, nobody's going to hurt your mom. Not while I'm breathing. The convoy of black SUVs roared out of the parking lot, tires screaming against wet asphalt. Adriano Moretti was going to war. And God help anyone who stood in his way. The Mercedes ate up the rain-slicked streets, Rocco behind the wheel pushing 90 through red lights. 2 SUVs full of armed men flanked them like wolves protecting their alpha. Adriano sat in the back, one arm around Emma, the other hand gripping his phone. Talk to me, Marco, he barked into the speaker. What do we know about the Riverside Motel? Cheap place, boss. Weekly rentals, mostly cash customers who don't want questions asked. Marco's voice crackled through. I got 3 cars headed there now. If this is a setup. It's not. Adriano looked down at Emma, who was pressed against his side, still shaking. Keep your eyes open anyway. He ended the call. The silence in the car felt thick enough to cut. Rocco's eyes kept flicking to the rearview mirror, studying Emma with barely concealed shock. Finally, he spoke. Boss, is she really? Drive faster. You always said no family. No weakness. That's how you stayed alive this long. Rocco's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. If word gets out that you got a kid, then word better not get out. Adriano's voice could have frozen gasoline. You understand me? Rocco nodded and pushed the accelerator harder. Emma shifted against Adriano's side, her small voice barely audible over the rain. Are you mad at me? The question caught him off guard.
What? No.
Why would I be mad at you? Because I came to find you. Her lip trembled. Mommy always said I should never, ever try to find my daddy. She said it was dangerous. But she was screaming and the bad men wouldn't stop, and I didn't know what else to do. Something twisted in Adriano's chest. 8 years. Isabella had kept his daughter hidden for 8 years, raised her alone, probably struggling every single day rather than come to him for help. Because she knew what he was, what he'd always be. You did the right thing, Emma, he pulled her closer, awkward but trying. Your mom. She had her reasons for keeping you away. But you coming to get me? That was brave. The bravest thing I've seen in a long time. Braver than shooting bad guys? Despite everything, Adriano almost smiled. Way braver than that. She was quiet for a moment then. The men who hurt Mommy. They kept asking her questions. Where is he? Where's the money? Tell us, or we'll hurt your daughter too. Emma's voice dropped to a whisper. But Mommy wouldn't tell them anything. She just kept screaming at me to run. Adriano's blood ran cold. What did these men look like, Emma? Can you remember? One had a really big scar. She traced a line down her own face.
Here.
And he smelled like cigarettes. The other one had tattoos on his neck. Snakes, I think. Adriano pulled out his phone, scrolled through his contacts until he found a folder of photos. Images of faces. Men who'd crossed him. Men who worked for his rivals. Men who might want him dead. He stopped on one particular photo. This guy. He showed her carefully. Emma's whole body went rigid. That's him. That's the scary one with the scar. Adriano closed his eyes. Vincent Caruso. One of Vito Leone's top enforcers. This wasn't random violence. This wasn't a robbery gone wrong. This was a message meant for him. Rocco, call ahead. Tell our guys to take anyone alive if possible. I need answers. You think Leone's behind this? I know he is. Adriano's jaw clenched. The question is how he found out about Isabella after all these years. The motel came into view, a rundown two-story building with a flickering neon sign that read VA ANSI. The sea burned out years ago. 3 of Adriano's SUVs were already there, men in dark suits spreading out with weapons drawn. Even from a distance, Adriano could see the broken door hanging off its hinges. Room 12. The windows were dark. Stay in a car, he told Emma firmly, already reaching for the door handle. No. She grabbed his jacket with both hands. Don't leave me. What if they come back?
Adriano hesitated.
Every instinct screamed at him to keep her safe in the car, but those terrified eyes. He'd just found out he had a daughter. He wasn't about to traumatize her more by abandoning her now. Rocco, you're with her. Anything that moves wrong, you put it down. Understand? Rocco nodded, pulling his weapon. On my life, boss. Adriano stepped out into the rain. Immediately, one of his men rushed over, a kid named Tommy who looked green around the gills. Boss, we got here 2 minutes ago. The door was already busted. We went in quiet and Tommy swallowed hard. You need to see this. Survivors? No one inside. Just
blood.
A lot of it. Adriano's heart dropped into his stomach. He walked toward room 12, each step feeling like he was moving through concrete. His men parted for him, their faces grim. The door hung at an angle, splintered where it had been kicked in. Adriano stepped through, and the scene hit him like a physical blow. The small room was destroyed. Lamp shattered on the floor, mattress half off the bed, holes punched in the walls.
And blood.
Streaked across the floor, spattered on the peeling wallpaper, pooling near the bathroom door.
Too much blood.
A child's drawing lay crumpled in the corner. He picked it up with shaking hands. 3 stick figures under a sunshine, a woman, a little girl, and in the corner, carefully colored but separate, a man. Daddy was written in crayon above him. Isabella had kept a picture of him. Even after everything, she'd let Emma know she had a father. Boss, Marco appeared in the doorway. Bathrooms clear. Bedrooms clear. No body, but track the blood trail. Now, Adriano's voice was dead calm, the kind of calm that preceded explosions. And find me Vincent Caruso. I don't care if he's in church confessing his sins. Drag him out. There's more, boss. Marco held out a cell phone. The screen cracked but still working. We found this under the bed. The last call made was to 911, but they hung up before anyone answered. Before that, he turned the phone around. Text messages. All to one number. Adriano looked at the screen. The messages were simple, desperate. He found us, taking Emma somewhere safe. If anything happens, tell him I'm sorry. Tell him I never stopped. The last message was unsent, incomplete. Adriano's hand closed around the phone so hard the screen cracked further. Isabella had been running. She'd known someone was coming for her, and she'd thought about telling him. Search everything within a mile. Hospitals, clinics, anywhere someone might take a bleeding woman. He turned to face his assembled crew, all 15 of them watching their boss crack in real time. And someone tell me how Vito Leone knew my ex-wife was alive when I've spent 8 years with the best intelligence network in the city and found nothing. No one answered, because the answer was obvious and terrifying. Someone in Adriano's organization had betrayed him, and Isabella was bleeding out somewhere in the night because of it. The gunshot cracked through the rain like a lightning strike. Adriano's head snapped toward the sound, behind the motel, past the dumpsters and the rusted chain-link fence. Another shot, then a scream. A woman's scream. That's Mommy. Emma's voice pierced through the car window where Rocco was holding her back. Adriano was already running, his men flooding after him like a dark tide. They rounded the corner of the building into a scene straight from hell. The motel's back lot was nothing but broken asphalt and weeds, lit by a single flickering streetlight. 2 men stood over a figure on the ground, both holding pistols. One of them, the one with the snake tattoos crawling up his neck, was raising his weapon for another shot. And there, crumpled against the brick wall, arms wrapped protectively around nothing because her daughter was already gone, was Isabella. Even bloodied and beaten, Adriano would have recognized her anywhere. 8 years hadn't erased the curve of her face from his memory, the dark hair he used to run his fingers through, the defiant set of her jaw even as she stared death in the face. Wrong move, sweetheart, Snake Tattoo was saying, his voice carrying across the lot. Vito wants you alive to send a message, but he didn't say you had to be walking. The scarred man, Vincent Caruso, laughed. Where'd the kid go anyway? Little brat ran fast. Faster than you idiots expected. Isabella's voice was weak but sharp. She's gone. You'll never find her. Oh, we'll find her, Vincent bent down, grabbing her hair. And when we do, she'll watch us kill you slow.
Just like Vito wants.
But first, you're going to let her go. Adriano's voice cut through the rain like a blade. Both men spun around. Their eyes went wide when they saw Adriano Moretti standing there with 15 armed men fanning out behind him, weapons trained and ready. Oh shit, Snake Tattoo breathed. Yeah. Adriano walked forward slowly, his Glock steady in his hand. Oh shit is right. Vincent's face twisted into something between fear and calculation. He grabbed Isabella, hauling her up as a shield, pressing his gun to her temple. Back off, Moretti. I'll paint the wall with her brains. I swear to God. Isabella's eyes found Adriano's across the distance. Even in the dim light, even after 8 years, that look hit him like a freight train.
Pain.
Relief. Terror. And something else. A warning. Don't, she whispered. Not to Vincent. To Adriano. But it was too late. He was already moving. The firefight lasted exactly 4 seconds. Marco took Snake Tattoo's knee out with a shotgun blast. The man went down screaming. Tommy and another enforcer opened fire, forcing Vincent to duck, his grip on Isabella loosening for just a heartbeat. That's all Adriano needed. He crossed the distance in 3 strides, faster than a man his size should move, and drove his shoulder into Vincent's gut. They went down hard, Vincent's gun skittering away across the wet asphalt. Adriano didn't give him a chance to recover. His fist crashed into Vincent's scarred face once, twice, 3 times, feeling bone crack under his knuckles. You put your hands on her. Another punch. You put your hands on my wife. Ex-wife. Vincent gurgled through broken teeth, actually smiling. And Vito's gonna kill you for this. You broke the rules, Moretti. You went soft. Adriano pressed the Glock under Vincent's chin. Tell Vito I'll see him in hell.
Adriano, no.
Isabella's voice stopped him cold. He looked up. She had dragged herself to her feet, leaning heavily against the wall. Blood soaked through her shirt from a wound in her side. Her face was a mess of bruises, lips split, one eye swelling shut. But she was standing, and she was looking at him like she used to back when she still believed he could be saved. "Don't kill him in front of her," Isabella whispered. That's when Adriano realized. Emma had gotten out of the car. His daughter stood at the edge of the parking lot, Rocco trying and failing to hold her back, watching her father beat a man to death with his bare hands. Everything froze. Adriano looked down at Vincent, at the blood on his knuckles, at the gun in his hand, then at his daughter's face, pale and shocked in the streetlight. 7 years old, and already learning what her father really was. A monster. "Get them in the car," he said quietly, standing up. "Marco, you and Tommy secure these two. I want them alive for questioning." "Boss." Marco sounded confused. Adriano Moretti didn't leave enemies breathing. "You heard me." He walked toward Isabella, each step heavy with 8 years of anger and regret. She watched him come, not backing away, but not reaching for him either. When he got close, he saw the full extent of the damage. Bruises around her throat where someone had choked her. Blood matting her hair. The gunshot wound in her side, still bleeding. "Hi, Bella," he said softly, using the name he hadn't spoken in 8 years. "Hi, Ade," her voice cracked.
I'm sorry.
"I'm so sorry. I try to keep her away from all this." "I know," he reached for her, slow and careful, like approaching a wounded animal. "Can you walk?" "I don't think so," she swayed, and he caught her before she fell. "They shot me. I think it went through, but it hurts like—" "I got you." He lifted her into his arms, and it felt like time folding back on itself. How many times had he carried her like this? Into their apartment after their wedding. Up the stairs when she'd twisted her ankle. Into the hospital when her father died. Before everything went wrong. Isabella's head rested against his chest. "You look older." "So do you." "Liar. I look like hell." "You look alive," his voice caught. "That's all that matters." Emma ran up, tears streaming down her face. "Mommy. Mommy, you're okay." "Hey, baby." Isabella reached down with one shaking hand to touch her daughter's face. "I told you to stay in the car." She doesn't listen. Adriano managed something close to a smile. "Wonder where she gets that." "Definitely from you." Isabella's eyes met his, and for just a moment, it was like the 8 years of silence had never happened. Then her expression changed, hardening. "Don't let her see you like this." Adriano looked down at himself. Blood spattered across his white shirt. Vincent's blood on his knuckles. Gun still in his hand. He looked every inch the killer he was. "She already has," he said quietly. Isabella's eyes filled with tears. "That's what I was trying to prevent." "I know." Rocco pulled up with the Mercedes, and Adriano carried Isabella to the car, Emma running alongside them. As he settled Isabella into the back seat, she grabbed his wrist with surprising strength. "They'll come for her now," she whispered. "Vito knows about Emma. That's why they came for me. To draw you out. Then I'll end him. That's what he wants, Ade. He wants you angry. He wants you to make mistakes." She squeezed his wrist tighter. "Promise me you won't let this war touch her." Adriano looked at his daughter, already climbing into the car beside her mother, so small and innocent and completely unaware that her existence had just made her the most valuable target in the city. "I promise," he lied. Because they both knew the truth. The war had already started, and Emma was standing right in the middle of it. The safe house was a 2-story brick building in the industrial district, sandwiched between a closed factory and a warehouse Adriano owned. 3 exits, reinforced doors, and enough weapons stashed inside to start a small war. He'd bought it years ago for situations exactly like this. He just never imagined he'd be using it for his own family. Doc Stevens was already waiting when they arrived, a thin man in his 60s with steady hands and a strict policy of not asking questions. He took one look at Isabella being carried in and immediately pointed to the bedroom. "Get her on the bed. I need light, hot water, and everyone out except one person to assist. I'll stay. Adriano said. No, Isabella's voice was weak but firm. Emma stays with me. She looked at him, at the blood drying on his shirt, the rage still simmering in his eyes. You need to clean up. It wasn't a suggestion. It was her telling him that she didn't want her daughter watching him pace like a caged animal while she got stitched up. That Emma had already seen too much tonight. Adriano nodded stiffly and walked out, leaving his daughter, holding her mother's hand. The hallway felt too narrow, too quiet. He could hear Doc Stevens talking in low tones, the clink of medical instruments, Isabella's sharp intake of breath as the doctor examined her wounds. Each sound was a knife twisting in his gut. Marco and Tommy stood guard by the front door. 2 more men watched the back. Rocco leaned against the wall, arms crossed, studying Adriano with an expression that was equal parts concerned and calculating. You're covered in blood, boss. Adriano looked down. His white shirt was more red than white now. Vincent's blood, Isabella's blood, rain, and dirt. He must look like something out of a nightmare. There's a bathroom upstairs, Rocco continued. Clean clothes in the closet. You should. I'm fine. You're not fine. You just found out you got a 7-year-old kid and your ex-wife's been shot. Rocco pushed off the wall. That's about as far from fine as it gets. Adriano's jaw clenched. What's your point? My point is, you're thinking with your heart right now instead of your head. And that's dangerous. Rocco glanced toward the bedroom door. For all of us. Say what you mean, Rocco. Rocco stepped closer, lowering his voice. I talked to Tommy while you were at the motel. He did some digging on those 2 guys we grabbed. Vincent Caruso and Joey Snake Romano. Both work directly for Vito Leone. But here's the thing, they weren't supposed to be there tonight. Adriano's attention sharpened. Explain. Vincent was supposed to be in Atlantic City on a job. Joey was supposed to be collecting from some debtors across town. Both of them suddenly show up at a random motel to beat up a woman nobody's supposed to know about. Rocco shook his head. This wasn't random, boss. This was planned. How long have they been planning it? That's what worries me. Rocco pulled out his phone, showed Adriano a text message thread. I got this from one of our guys who's got connections in Leone's crew. Vincent and Joey were given that job 3 days ago. 3 days, boss. They've known where Isabella was for at least that long. The implications hit Adriano like a truck. They were watching her. Waiting for the right moment. And they chose tonight, the same night you had that meeting at the cafe. The same night half your top guys were in one place. Rocco's expression was grim. They wanted you distracted. They wanted you emotional. And they got exactly what they wanted. Adriano's fist slammed into the wall, leaving a dent in the drywall. Someone told them where she was. Someone in my organization. Has to be. Isabella disappeared 8 years ago. She changed her name, covered her tracks. I spent months looking for her back then, we all did. She was a ghost. And suddenly Vito's boys know exactly which motel she's staying at. Rocco shook his head. Someone's been feeding him information. The bedroom door opened. Doc Stevens stepped out, pulling off bloody gloves. His expression was carefully neutral. She'll live. The bullet went clean through, missed anything vital. Lots of bruising, a couple cracked ribs, mild concussion. She needs rest and antibiotics, he paused. She's also severely malnourished. That woman's been struggling for a while. Adriano felt something crack inside his chest. All this time, Isabella had been out there, barely scraping by, raising their daughter alone. Too proud or too scared to ask him for help. Can I see her? Give her a few minutes. I gave her something for the pain. She's talking to your daughter right now. Doc Stevens studied Adriano. That little girl's been through hell tonight.
She's tough, though.
Looks just like you. After the doctor left, Adriano stood there in the hallway, listening to the soft murmur of voices from the bedroom. Isabella's voice, tired but steady, telling Emma everything would be okay. Emma's voice, small and worried, asking if the bad men would come back. Boss, Rocco's voice pulled him back. We need to talk about next steps. Vito's not going to stop. Now that he knows about Emma. He knows about Emma because someone told him. Adriano turned, and his expression must have been terrifying because Rocco actually took a step back. Find out who. I don't care if you have to interrogate every person in my organization one by one. Find the rat. And when I do, bring them to me alive. I want to look them in the eye before I end them. Rocco nodded. What about Vito? He's going to expect retaliation. He'll be dug in, waiting for you to come at him angry. Then I won't give him what he expects. Adriano's mind was already working, the initial panic and rage crystallizing into something colder and more dangerous. Get me everything we have on Vito's operation. His businesses, his safe houses, his routines. And find out who his inside source is on our end. You think he's got someone feeding him information too? I know he does. That's how this works. We plant people in his organization. He plants people in ours. Adriano looked back toward the bedroom. But this time, someone gave him something he should never have had. They gave him my family. The bedroom door opened. Emma poked her head out, her eyes red from crying, but her expression determined. Mommy wants to talk to you, she said quietly. She says it's important. Adriano nodded, then hesitated. He was still covered in blood. Still looked like the monster Isabella had spent 8 years protecting Emma from. But Emma just reached up and took his hand. It's okay, she said, with the simple wisdom of a child who decided to trust him. You saved us. Mommy told me you'd always save us. Something in Adriano's chest, something that had been frozen solid for 8 years, cracked wide open. He let his daughter lead him into the bedroom, where Isabella lay propped up on pillows, bandaged and bruised but alive. Her eyes met his, and he saw it all there. The history between them, the love that had curdled into fear, the desperate hope that maybe, somehow, they could survive this. We need to talk, she said, about why I really left, and about who's been hunting us all this time. Adriano pulled up a chair, Emma climbing into his lap like she'd done it 1,000 times before. And Isabella Moretti began to tell him the truth about the last 8 years, a truth that would change everything he thought he knew. Dawn crept through the safe-house windows like an unwelcome guest, painting everything in shades of gray and gold. Isabella woke slowly, her body screaming in protest at every small movement. The painkillers had worn off, leaving behind a dull, throbbing ache that reminded her she was still alive.
Barely.
The room came into focus. Unfamiliar ceiling. Sterile white walls. The smell of antiseptic and old leather. For a terrifying moment, she couldn't remember where she was or how she'd gotten there. Then she felt the weight against her side. Warm and small and breathing softly.
Emma.
Her daughter, curled up beside her in the bed, still wearing the torn nightgown from last night. Dried tear tracks on her cheeks. One small hand clutching Isabella's shirt like she was afraid to let go even in sleep. Isabella's heart clenched. She'd failed. She'd spent 8 years running, hiding, sacrificing everything to keep Emma safe from this world. And in one night, it had all come crashing down. That's when she noticed him. Adriano sat in the corner of the room, half hidden in shadow, watching them. He hadn't moved closer, hadn't tried to join them on the bed. Just sat there in a chair that was too small for his frame, hands clasped, jaw tight, those dark eyes tracking every breath Isabella took. He'd changed clothes. The blood-stained suit was gone, replaced by a simple black shirt and jeans. But he looked exhausted, haunted, like he'd been sitting there all night, keeping vigil over something precious that might disappear if he looked away. How long have you been there? Isabella's voice came out rough, barely above a whisper. Does it matter? I suppose not. She tried to sit up, winced at the sharp pain in her side. You should be sleeping. So should you. They stared at each other across the room, 8 years of silence hanging between them like a physical thing. So much to say. So much that couldn't be unsaid. Finally, Adriano spoke. You swore you'd never come near her. Isabella blinked, confused. What? The night you left. You made me promise, if you ever had a child, I'd stay away. That I'd let them grow up without knowing what I am. His voice was flat, emotionless. You made me swear it. And I did. The memory hit her like a slap. Their last fight in their apartment, both of them screaming. Her begging him to leave the life. Him refusing. Her saying the words that ended everything. If I ever have a baby, I won't let you near them. I won't let you turn them into what you are. You swore, Adriano repeated. You swore you'd never come near her. But you kept my name. Isabella Moretti. Emma Moretti, his jaw clenched. You swore you'd never use my name. Isabella felt heat rise in her chest. Even now, even after everything, he could make her furious in 2 sentences flat. I had to, she said, her voice sharp despite the pain. Do you have any idea how hard it is to disappear when you're married to a mafia boss? Your people were everywhere, all day. Every hospital, every bank, every government office. If I'd changed my name legally, you would have found me in a week. So you stayed Isabella Moretti, and just, what? Hoped I wouldn't look. No, I changed our identities anyway. Fake social security numbers, fake birth certificates, fake everything. She touched Emma's hair gently, making sure she was still asleep. I kept the name because it was the one thing I couldn't fake well enough. And because she paused, swallowing hard. Because Emma deserved to know where she came from, even if she could never meet you. Adriano leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I looked for you. For 2 years, I had every resource I owned searching. And nothing. It was like you'd vanished into thin air. That was the point. Why, Bella? The question came out raw, desperate. Why keep her from me? I would have. You would have what? Changed? Isabella's laugh was bitter. You told me yourself that night. You said you could never leave the life. That it was in your blood. That asking you to walk away was like asking you to stop breathing. That's not. You put a man's head through a car window because he looked at me wrong at a restaurant. You killed a waiter who flirted with me. You nearly started a war because someone said my name without respect. Isabella's voice cracked. I loved you, Adriano. God help me. I loved you so much it hurt. But I was drowning in blood, and I couldn't. I wouldn't bring a child into that. The silence that followed was suffocating. Adriano stood slowly, walked to the window. His reflection in the glass looked like a ghost. I never stopped watching, he said quietly. Isabella's breath caught. What? After you disappeared. After I couldn't find you through official channels, I hired private investigators. People you wouldn't recognize, who didn't work for me directly. They'd send me reports. Photos. He turned to face her. I knew about Emma 6 months after she was born. The world tilted. You knew. I knew you were in Portland for a year. Then Seattle. Then back to Jersey under a different first name, but keeping Moretti, he smiled. But it was sad and broken. I knew Emma's birthday. Her first word. The preschool you enrolled her in. Every time you moved, I knew within a week. Isabella felt like she'd been punched. Why didn't you? Because you asked me not to. Adriano's voice was barely audible. That last night, you begged me. You said if I ever loved you, I'd let you go. Let you have a life that wasn't stained with what I am.
So I did.
I stayed away. I watched from a distance, made sure you were safe, made sure Emma had everything she needed. The money, Isabella's eyes widened. The anonymous payments to my account. That was you. Every month, for 7 years. Not enough to trace. Not enough to make you suspicious. Just enough to keep you fed and housed. He rubbed his face. I'm sorry it wasn't more.
I'm sorry you struggled anyway.
I'm sorry I wasn't. Stop. Isabella's eyes were filled with tears. Just stop. Emma stirred between them, making a small sound in her sleep. Both adults froze, waiting. But she just rolled over, still lost in whatever dreams 7-year-olds had. Isabella looked at Adriano, really looked at him. The man she'd loved. The man she'd feared. The man who'd kept them alive from the shadows for 8 years without asking for anything in return. You should have told me, she whispered. You would have run further. Disappeared better. Taken Emma somewhere I couldn't find. He met her eyes. Would I be wrong?
No.
He wouldn't be wrong. If Isabella had known Adriano was watching, tracking them, she would have gone to Canada, Mexico, somewhere truly untraceable. Why now? She asked. If you'd stayed away this long, why come when Emma showed up? You could have sent your men. You didn't have to. She's my daughter. The words came out fierce, possessive. My blood. My child. The second she walked into that cafe crying for help, everything else stopped mattering. I don't care about promises. I don't care about what's smart or safe or right. He walked closer, stopping at the edge of the bed. I care that someone hurt you. Someone hurt my little girl. And I will burn this entire city down before I let that happen again. Isabella shivered. There it was. The man she'd fallen in love with and the monster she'd run from, existing in the same breath. That's exactly what I was afraid of, she whispered. You can't see it, can you? The violence. The obsession. The way you love people by destroying everyone around them. I know what I am, Bella. I've always known Adriano's hands clenched at his sides. But I also know that somewhere out there, Vito Leone knows about Emma now.
And he'll use her to get to me.
He'll hurt her, kill her, just to watch me break. So you can hate me all you want. You can tell me I'm a monster. But I'm the monster who's going to keep you both alive. Emma mumbled something in her sleep, and both of them fell silent. Isabella closed her eyes, exhaustion pulling at her. I never stopped loving you, she admitted, so quietly he almost missed it. That's the worst part. After everything, after running for 8 years, I never stopped. When she opened her eyes again, Adriano was closer. Close enough to touch. Close enough that she could see the tears he was fighting back. I never stopped either, he said. And the tension between them, the old love, the deep betrayal, the impossible situation, crackled like lightning waiting to strike. The call came at 8 in the morning. Adriano had finally stepped out of Isabella's room to give her space to rest. He stood in the safe house kitchen, forcing down coffee that tasted like gasoline, when his phone buzzed. Rocco's name flashed on the screen. Tell me you found something, Adriano answered. More than something, boss. Rocco's voice was tight. We got Vincent Caruso talking. Took some persuasion, but he cracked. You need to hear this.
I'm listening.
Vincent confirmed what we suspected. Vito Leone ordered the hit on Isabella. But it wasn't just about sending you a message, Rocco paused. It was about drawing you out, making you emotional, making you sloppy. Adriano's grip on the phone tightened. What else? Vito's known about Isabella for at least 6 months. He's had people watching her, documenting her routines, waiting for the right moment to strike. The attack last night wasn't random violence, boss. It was choreographed. They wanted Emma to escape. They wanted her to run to you. The coffee mug in Adriano's hand cracked. He set it down carefully before he crushed it completely. Why? Because now everyone knows Don Adriano Moretti has a weakness. You've spent 20 years building a reputation as the guy who doesn't break, who doesn't have pressure points. No family, no attachments, nothing anyone can use against you. Rocco's voice dropped.
Until now.
Now, every enemy you've made, every rival family, every punk who wants to make a name, they all know about Emma. Adriano closed his eyes. This was his nightmare. The exact reason he'd stayed away from Isabella and Emma for 8 years. In his world, love was a weapon. Family was a liability. And now his daughter had a target painted on her back. There's more, Rocco continued. Vincent said something weird before we finished with him. He said, Vito's been planning this since the wedding. What wedding, boss? Yours. Vito wasn't at my wedding. He was in prison 8 years ago for... Adriano stopped cold. The pieces clicked together in his mind with sickening clarity. Oh, God. What? Get to the cafe.
Right now.
Check for packages, deliveries, anything that came in the last 12 hours. Adriano was already moving, grabbing his jacket and gun. And Rocco? Be careful what you open. 20 minutes later, Adriano stood outside the Moretti Cafe staring at the black box on the counter. It was small, wrapped in brown paper. No return address. Someone had left it by the back door sometime after midnight when the cafe was closed. The staff had found it when they'd opened for the morning shift, assumed it was a delivery, and brought it inside. Marco stood next to it, looking pale. "Boss, we scanned it. No explosives, no toxins. But there's something inside. Something heavy." "Open it," Adriano ordered. Marco cut through the tape with a knife, pulled back the paper, and lifted the lid. Then he stepped back quickly, his face going white. Inside the box, nestled in black tissue paper, was a framed photograph. The glass was cracked, spiderwebbing across the image. And the photograph itself was stained with something dark and dried.
Blood.
Adriano reached in and lifted the frame carefully. His hands didn't shake. They should have. But years of violence had taught him how to bury emotion under ice. It was his wedding photo. Him and Isabella on the church steps, 8.5 years ago. Both of them young and smiling and stupidly in love. Isabella in a white dress that had cost more than most people's cars. Adriano in a tailored suit, his arm around her waist, both of them looking at each other instead of the camera like they'd forgotten anyone else existed. He remembered that moment. The photographer had asked them to look at the lens, but Isabella had just laughed and kissed his cheek, and he turned to her, and the photographer had snapped the picture anyway. It was Adriano's favorite photo from that day. He'd burned all his copies when Isabella left. Destroyed every picture, every reminder, every trace of what they'd been. Or so he'd thought. "There's a note," Marco said quietly, pointing to a small card tucked under the frame. Adriano pulled it out. The handwriting was neat, precise, mocking. "You can't bury what belongs to the family." The message was clear. Vito Leone had kept this photo, had saved it for 8 years, waiting, planning, preparing for the moment when he could use Adriano's past against him. And the blood on the glass, Isabella's blood, was proof that Vito could reach anyone, anywhere, anytime he wanted. This wasn't just a threat. It was a declaration of war wrapped in a memory. "Boss." Rocco had arrived, breathing hard from running up the stairs. "What is it?" Adriano handed him the photo, without speaking. Rocco looked at it, read the note, and his expression darkened. "That son of a bitch. He's been sitting on this for years, waiting for the perfect time to." He stopped, understanding flooding his face. "He knew you were watching Isabella. He knew you were protecting her from a distance. That's why he waited. He let you think she was safe just so he could rip it away." "Evacuate the cafe," Adriano said, his voice dead calm. "Get everyone out. Staff, customers, everyone. Right now." "You think he's coming here?" "I think this is step 1. The wedding photo is him saying he knows everything about me. Everything I care about. Everything I've tried to protect." Adriano set the frame down on the counter. "And the bloodstain is him saying he can destroy it whenever he wants." Marco was already on his phone, barking orders. Within minutes, confused employees were being ushered out the front door, the closed sign flipped, locks engaged. "What's step 2? Rocco asked. "He's going to go after someone close to me. Someone visible." Adriano pulled out his phone, started making calls. "Get protection on my mother. Double the security at my clubs. And find out where Vito is right now. I want eyes on him every second." His phone buzzed before Rocco could respond. A text message from an unknown number. No words, just a photo. It was Emma's preschool, the playground where children were currently running around, laughing, playing. And in the corner of the image, barely visible, was a man in a dark jacket watching them. Adriano's blood turned to ice. "They're at Emma's school," he breathed. "But Emma's not. She's at the safe house. She's safe," Marco said. They don't know that Adriano was already moving toward the door. They think she's still living her normal life. They're watching the school because that's where she should be. Which means they don't know where the safe house is yet, Rocco finished. But they're looking. Another text came through. "Cute kid. Would be a shame if something happened to her classmates. Tell you what, you have 24 hours to turn yourself into me. alone and unarmed. Do that, and the kids stay safe. Don't, and we start making examples. Your choice, Moretti. Adriano stared at the message, his mind racing. Vito was smart. He knew Adriano wouldn't sacrifice innocent children, not even to save himself. The play was genius in its cruelty. Force Adriano to surrender or live with the guilt of dead kids on his conscience. But there was a third option, one that Vito wasn't expecting. Rocco, I need you to do something for me. Adriano's voice was cold now, calculated. The emotion had drained away, replaced by the ruthless strategist who'd built an empire on careful planning and brutal execution. And you're not going to like it. What? I need you to call Vito. Tell him I'll meet him. Alone like he wants. Tomorrow night at the warehouse on 5th. Boss, that's suicide. He'll have 50 guys waiting too. I know. That's why you're going to prepare a surprise for him. Adriano smiled, but it was the smile of a shark. No civilians get caught in this. You understand? Whatever happens, no innocent people die. We do this my way. Marco stepped forward. What do you need us to do? Everything. Adriano looked at his men, these soldiers who'd followed him for years. Call in every favor we have. Every gun. Every soldier. Every person who owes us. Because in 24 hours, the Moretti family goes to war. And when the smoke clears, Vito Leone won't have anything left to threaten us with. And if it doesn't work? Rocco asked quietly. If Vito outplays us. Adriano picked up the blood-stained wedding photo, studied Isabella's smiling face. Then I make sure my girls get far away from here before I burn it all down. The line in the sand had been drawn. Now came the blood. Evenings settled over the safe house like a heavy blanket. Adriano returned just after 7, his mind still churning with plans and contingencies. Vito's ultimatum hung over him like a guillotine blade, 24 hours to surrender or watch innocent children die. He'd spent the day coordinating with his people, moving pieces into position, preparing for a war that would either end with Vito's death or his own. But first, he needed to see them. His family. The reason he was willing to burn the world down. Emma was in the living room with one of his guards, drawing pictures with crayons someone had bought for her. She looked up when he entered and smiled, actually smiled at him, like having a mafia boss for a father was the most natural thing in the world. I drew you, she announced, holding up a picture of a stick figure with dark scribbles for hair and what might have been a gun. You're fighting the bad guys. Adriano's throat tightened. That's really good, sweetheart. Do you really have to fight them? He crouched down beside her, tried to find words that wouldn't be a lie, but wouldn't terrify her either. Sometimes grown-ups have to do hard things to keep the people they love safe. Emma studied him with those two knowing eyes. Mommy says fighting never fixes anything. Your mom's a smart woman, but you're going to fight anyway, aren't you? He couldn't answer that. Didn't know how to explain that fighting was all he knew, that violence was the language he'd been speaking for so long he'd forgotten any other way. Is your mom awake? He asked instead. She's in the bedroom. She's been crying. Emma's voice dropped to a whisper. I think she's scared. Of course she was scared. Adriano stood, ruffled Emma's hair gently, and headed toward the bedroom. He needed Isabella to understand his plan, to know that he was handling this, that she and Emma would be safe. He pushed the door open without knocking. Isabella sat on the edge of the bed, her back to the door. At the sound of his entrance, she turned and flinched. It was instinctive, automatic. Her whole body jerked back, shoulders hunching, one hand coming up defensively. For a split second, her eyes went wide with fear. Then she caught herself, forced her body to relax, lowered her hand. But the damage was done. Adriano froze in the doorway. He'd seen that look before. On the faces of men who knew they were about to die. On witnesses who'd seen too much. On people who understood exactly what he was capable of. But never from her. Never from Isabella. Sorry, she said quickly, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. You startled me. I knocked, he lied.
Right.
I must not have heard. She stood up too fast, winced at the pain in her side. Did you need something? This was wrong. Everything about this was wrong. The careful distance she was keeping. The way her eyes tracked his hands like she was calculating escape routes. The tight set of her jaw. Bella, his voice came out rougher than he intended. What was that? What was what? You flinched. You looked at me and you flinched. He stepped further into the room and watched her take a corresponding step back. You think I'd ever hurt you? No, the answer was immediate, automatic. Of course not. Then why are you looking at me like I'm about to? Isabella's composure cracked. Her hands clenched into fists at her sides. Because I know what you're planning, Ade.
I can see it in your eyes.
You're going to go after Vito, and you're going to be brutal about it, and you're going to justify it by saying it's to protect us. It is to protect you.
No.
It's to punish him for daring to touch what you consider yours. Her voice shook. There's a difference. Adriano felt like he'd been slapped. That's not fair. Isn't it? You've been gone all day. Making plans, gathering soldiers, preparing for war. Did you once consider taking Emma and me somewhere safe? Actually getting us out of the city, away from all this?
No.
Because that would mean giving up control. That would mean trusting someone else to handle Vito while you run. And you can't do that, can you? You have to be the one to end it. You have to make them pay. Isabella's eyes were bright with unshed tears. Even if it means painting a bigger target on Emma's back in the process. I'm trying to protect you both. By starting a war? Her voice rose. Vito wants you emotional, Ade. He wants you reckless. And you're giving him exactly what he wants, because you can't see past your need for revenge. He threatened our daughter. And you're making it worse. Isabella's control shattered. You think Vito's the only one watching now? You think he's the only one who knows about Emma? By tomorrow, every enemy you've ever made will know Don Adriano Moretti has a 7-year-old daughter. And they'll all be thinking the same thing. That's his weakness. That's how we hurt him. The words hit like bullets. Because she was right. Adriano knew she was right. Every move he made now would be watched, analyzed, used against him. And Emma would be at the center of it all. So, what do you want me to do? His voice dropped, dangerous. Let Vito win? Let him threaten my family and walk away. I want you to think. Isabella's hands pressed against her temples. I want you to be smart instead of angry. I want you to remember that your daughter is sleeping in the next room and she doesn't need a hero. She needs a father who'll still be alive tomorrow. I know what I'm doing. Do you? Isabella stepped closer, and now the fear in her eyes had transformed into something else. Something sadder. Because from where I'm standing, you're about to do exactly what you did 8 years ago. You're about to choose violence over everything else. And I can't, her voice broke. I can't watch you become that man again. Not in front of Emma. Adriano stared at her. What man? The one who solved every problem with blood. The one who couldn't walk away from a fight even when walking away was the smart choice. The one who loved me so much it felt like drowning. Isabella wrapped her arms around herself. You think I'm afraid of Vito? I'm not. Vito's just a man. A dangerous man, but just a man. She looked up at him, and her expression broke his heart. I'm afraid of you, Ade. I'm afraid of what you'll do to keep us. Because you don't just love people. You consume them. You destroy everything around them in the name of protection until there's nothing left but you and blood and guilt. The words cut deeper than any knife. That's not. Adriano started, but his voice failed. Because it was true. All of it.
He thought about their marriage.
How he'd isolated her from friends who he deemed risky. How he'd put guards on her every time she left the house. How he'd killed a man for grabbing her wrist at a bar, killed him in front of a dozen witnesses, started a turf war that lasted 6 months. He'd called it love. Called it protection. Isabella had called it a cage. I never meant to hurt you, he whispered. I know. That's the tragedy of it. Isabella's smile was heartbreaking. You genuinely thought you were keeping me safe. But you were so busy protecting me from everyone else, you never realized I needed protection from you. Adriano took a step back, then another. His hand found the doorframe, needing something solid to hold onto. Your love was beautiful, Ade, and terrifying, and suffocating. Isabella touched her chest, right over her heart. It cost me my freedom, my friends, my family. Everything I was before I met you got swallowed up by what you needed me to be. I didn't know. Yes, you did. You just didn't care. Because in your world, keeping me alive was more important than letting me live. The silence that followed was crushing. Adriano looked at this woman he'd loved for 8 years and lost for 8 more, and finally, understood why she'd run. Not because she'd stopped loving him, but because loving him had been killing her slowly, one careful restriction at a time. I'm sorry, he said. The words felt pathetically small. I know you are, Isabella wiped her eyes. But sorry doesn't change what you're about to do. You're still going to go after Vito. You're still going to make this personal. And when it's over, Emma and I will be right back where we started, trapped in your protection, suffocating under your love. She was right. Even now, with her words cutting through him like glass, his mind was already working on the plan, already calculating how to keep them close, keep them safe, keep them his. I don't know how to be different, he admitted. I know. That's why I left. Isabella moved to the window, looked out at the darkening sky. And that's why, when this is over, I'll have to leave again. The words hit him like a death sentence. Bella. Don't, she held up her hand.
Just don't. Fight your war, Ade.
Do what you need to do. But understand that every bullet you fire is another reason I have to take Emma and disappear. Because I won't let her grow up in a world where love looks like violence. Adriano stood there, feeling something inside him crack and break. His love had cost her freedom. And now it might cost him everything. The mansion felt like a tomb. Adriano stood at the head of the long table in his study, surrounded by 12 of his most trusted capos. These were men who'd killed for him, bled for him, built his empire brick by bloody brick. The air was thick with cigar smoke and tension. It was close to midnight. Less than 12 hours remained on Vito's ultimatum. We hit him tonight, Rocco said, slamming his fist on the table. We know where 3 of his warehouses are. We torch them all simultaneously, send a message that... No, Adriano's voice was quiet. Rocco stopped mid-sentence. Boss. I said no. The room went silent. Everyone stared at Adriano like he'd just spoken in another language. Marco leaned forward. Boss, with all due respect, Vito threatened your daughter.
He sent that message to your cafe.
He put blood on your wedding photo. We can't let that stand. We look weak if we don't retaliate. He's right. Another capo chimed in. The other families are watching. If we don't respond hard and fast, they'll think you've gone soft. They'll start testing boundaries. Let them think what they want. Adriano poured himself a whiskey, his hand steady. This isn't about reputation. Then what the hell is it about? Rocco stood, his frustration boiling over. Because from where I'm sitting, Vito Leone just declared war on you, and you're acting like we should send him a thank you card. Sit down, Rocco.
No.
Not until you explain why we're sitting here talking instead of putting bullets in that bastard skull, Rocco's voice rose. You taught me that hesitation gets you killed. You taught me that when someone threatens your family, you end them before they can make good on it. So, why are we waiting? Adriano drained his whiskey, set the glass down carefully. Because I have a 7-year-old daughter sleeping 2 miles from here. And if we go to war the way you want, burning buildings, shooting up warehouses, bodies in the street, what happens to her? She stays safe in the safe house while She grows up afraid. Adriano's eyes were cold. She grows up thinking her father is a monster who solves every problem with violence. She grows up exactly like I grew up, watching my father turn into something inhuman in the name of protection. The room shifted uncomfortably. No one talked about Adriano's father. The old Don had been brutal even by their standards, and everyone knew how badly that had scarred his son. Tommy, The youngest capo spoke up carefully. Boss, I get what you're saying, but Vito's not going to stop. He threatened kids at Emma's school. Innocent kids. If we don't take him out, he's going to hurt someone just to prove he can. I know. Adriano's jaw clenched. That's why we're going to end this. But we do it smart, not angry. We do it clean, not messy. And we do it in a way that keeps Emma's world separate from mine. Rocco threw his hands up. That's impossible. She already knows what you are. She saw you beat Vincent half to death. You can't unring that bell.
No.
But I can make sure she doesn't see worse. Adriano looked around the table at his men. I want surgical strikes. No civilians caught in the crossfire. No burning buildings where families live. No public shootouts where kids might see. You're asking us to fight with one hand tied behind our backs, Marco protested. I'm asking you to fight like professionals instead of savages. Adriano's voice hardened. Vito wants me emotional. He wants me sloppy. He's counting on me to come at him loud and stupid, so he can cut me down in front of everyone. I won't give him that satisfaction. Another capo, an older man named Sal, spoke up. What about the ultimatum? He wants you to surrender in 12 hours, or he starts killing kids. He's bluffing. How do you know? Because killing kids would unite every family in the city against him. Even our enemies have children. Even the cops would come down on him harder than they ever have. Adriano leaned forward. Vito's smart. That threat was designed to make me panic, not something he'd actually follow through on. And if you're wrong? Rocco challenged. Adriano met his lieutenant's eyes. Then I'll turn myself in before any child gets hurt. But I don't think I'm wrong. The room erupted in protests. Surrender was unthinkable. It violated every code they lived by. You can't be serious.
Marcos shouted.
You turn yourself over to Vito. You're dead within the hour. And if kids die because I chose pride over their lives, I'm dead anyway. Adriano stood, his presence commanding the room into silence. I'm not the same man I was a week ago. A week ago, I would have burned half the city down and slept fine. But that was before Emma ran into my cafe crying for help. That was before I understood what I've been doing to the people I love. He thought of Isabella's words. Your love cost me my freedom. I've spent 20 years building power by being the guy everyone's afraid of, Adriano continued. The guy who doesn't compromise. The guy who'd rather die than show weakness. And it cost me my wife. It nearly cost me my daughter before I even knew she existed. His voice dropped. I won't make that mistake again. Rocco shook his head. Boss, I've followed you for 15 years. But this is suicide. Maybe. Or maybe it's the first smart thing I've done in a long time. Adriano placed both hands on the table. Here's what's going to happen. We take out Vito, quietly, efficiently, permanently. We dismantle his operation piece by piece. But we do it in a way that doesn't splash blood across the evening news. We do it in a way that lets my daughter sleep at night. And how exactly do we do that?
Sal asked.
We use his own trap against him. He wants me at that warehouse tomorrow night. I'll be there. But not alone, and not unarmed like he demanded. Adriano smiled coldly. We turn his ambush into ours. Now the men were listening. This was strategy, they understood. Tommy, you'll position snipers on the buildings surrounding the warehouse. Marco, you get our people inside Vito's crew to leak false information about our numbers. Sal, I want 2 escape routes planned and vehicles ready. Adriano's mind was working now, calculating angles. And Rocco, you're going to be in the warehouse with me. Finally, something that makes sense, Rocco muttered. But Adriano held up a finger. No blood near the girl. That's the rule. I don't care how this plays out. I don't care if we have to run instead of fight. If it touches her life, if it puts her in danger, it ends. Do you understand? The room was silent. Do you understand? Adriano repeated, his voice like iron. Slowly, reluctantly, his capos nodded. This isn't about power anymore, Adriano said quietly. It's not about territory or respect or pride. It's about making sure that little girl gets to grow up without blood on her hands, without nightmares about what her father did in the dark. He stood straight, and for a moment he looked like the old Don Moretti, commanding, absolute, unmovable. We go to war, but we do it my way. Clean, quick, final. And when it's over, Emma wakes up in a world where she doesn't have to be afraid. His eyes swept across every face in the room. If any of you have a problem with that, leave now. Because I'm done choosing violence over the people I love. No one moved. Good, Adriano nodded. Then, let's end this. It was a war declaration unlike any he'd ever made. Not for power or revenge or pride, but for protection, for redemption, for a chance to be better than what he was. And if he died trying, at least Emma would know he'd tried. The meeting ended just after 1 a.m. The capos filed out one by one, heading to their assignments. Adriano stayed behind, reviewing maps and schematics for the warehouse operation. Rocco lingered in the doorway. "Boss," he said quietly, "can we talk? Just the two of us." Adriano looked up, saw something in his lieutenant's expression he couldn't quite read. Regret, maybe. Or resignation. "What's on your mind?" "I've been with you 15 years. Followed you through 6 wars for coups. More bodies than I can count." Rocco walked back to the table, his footsteps heavy. "You saved my life in Chicago. Made me your right hand when no one else would have trusted me. And you've earned it every day since. What's your point?" "My point is," Rocco met his eyes. "I'm sorry." Adriano's instincts screamed a warning, but too late. Rocco's phone was already out, already sending a message. Already done. "What did you do?" Adriano's voice dropped to something dangerous. "What I had to." Rocco stepped back toward the door. "You've changed, boss. Ever since that little girl showed up, you've gone soft. Talking about clean wars and protecting innocence and keeping blood away from Emma. That's not how we survive in this world." Adriano stood slowly, his hand moving toward his gun. "Rocco."
What did you do?
"I made a deal with Vito. He gets the safe house location. He gets Isabella and the kid. And I get to take over the family when you're dead or destroyed trying to save them." Rocco's jaw was tight. "Nothing personal. Just business." The world tilted. 15 years. 15 years of loyalty, brotherhood, trust. And it meant nothing. "You sold out my daughter." Adriano's voice was barely human. "I sold out your weakness." Rocco was already backing toward the door. "The old you would have understood. But you're not him anymore. And the family needs someone who is." Adriano drew his gun. Rocco was faster, already through the door, slamming it shut. Adriano heard the lock click, heard running footsteps. Then his phone rang.
"Marco." "Boss."
"The safe house. Someone leaked the address. There are 4 SUVs heading there right now, maybe 20 men there." Adriano was already running. The drive took 7 minutes that felt like 7 hours. Adriano pushed his Mercedes to 100 miles an hour, weaving through traffic, running red lights. His phone kept ringing, his guards at the safe house, panicking, reporting that vehicles were approaching, that they were surrounded. Then the line went dead. When he screeched around the corner 2 blocks from the safe house, he saw the smoke first, then heard the gunfire. 4 black SUVs blocked the street. Men with automatic weapons surrounded the building, firing into windows. Glass exploded outward. Someone was screaming inside. Adriano didn't slow down. He aimed the Mercedes straight at the nearest SUV and floored it. The impact was devastating. Metal crunched, bodies flew, his airbag exploded in his face. But he was already moving, kicking the door open, gun up, firing. 3 shots, 3 men down. "Emma." His voice roared over the gunfire. "Isabella." A bullet whizzed past his head. He dove behind the crashed SUV, returned fire, dropped 2 more of Vito's men. But there were too many. Way too many. Then he heard it. The sound that made his blood freeze. Emma screaming.
"Daddy. Daddy, help."
The front window of the safe house exploded outward. Isabella came through it, shielding Emma with her body, landing hard on the lawn. She was moving on pure adrenaline, half carrying, half dragging their daughter toward the tree line. But Vito's men saw them. Guns swung in their direction. Adriano didn't think. He stood up in full view and emptied his entire clip at the nearest gunman, drawing their fire toward himself and away from his family. Bullets tore through the air around him. One clipped his shoulder, white-hot pain. Another grazed his ribs. But he was still standing, still moving, sprinting toward Isabella and Emma. He reached them just as a gunman rounded the corner of the house. Adriano tackled him, drove his knee into the man's throat, grabbed his weapon, and fired back at the others. The car, Isabella pointed to his wrecked Mercedes, now smoking but maybe still drivable. Can it move? Only one way to find out. Adriano pulled Emma into his arms with one hand, kept firing with the other.
Run. Now.
They ran. Bullets chased them across the lawn, chewing up grass and concrete. Isabella stumbled, her wound from yesterday reopening, blood soaking through her shirt. But she kept moving, kept running, her maternal instinct overriding everything else. Adriano fired blindly behind them, giving them cover. His shoulder screamed in protest, blood running down his arm. He could feel Emma's heart hammering against his chest, her small arms wrapped around his neck in a death grip. The Mercedes was destroyed in the front, but the engine still growled. Adriano threw open the back door, practically threw Emma inside. Isabella dove in after her. He slid into the driver's seat, turned the key with shaking, bloody hands. The engine coughed, sputtered, caught. "Hold on," he shouted, and slammed the gas pedal. The Mercedes lurched forward, scraping against the SUV it had crashed into, metal shrieking. More bullets punched through the rear windshield, spider-webbing the glass. Adriano kept his head down, drove blind, trusting instinct and luck. They burst through the cordon of vehicles, sideswiping two more, and roared down the street. Only when they were 4 blocks away, when the gunfire faded behind them, did Adriano risk a glance in the rearview mirror. Isabella held Emma in her arms, both of them shaking, both alive. But Isabella's eyes, when they met his in the mirror, were filled with something worse than fear. They were filled with fury. "You promised," her voice shook with rage and terror. "You promised she'd be safe.
Bella.
You stood in that safe house and promised me that no blood would touch her, that you'd protect her." Isabella's voice rose to a scream. "And they came for her anyway. They shot at our baby, Adriano. She could have died." Emma was crying, her small body trembling. She looked at her mother, then at her father, confused and terrified by the adults yelling. Adriano's hands were white-knuckled on the steering wheel, his shoulder bleeding, his ribs screaming. "I'm keeping that promise now. By running? By barely escaping with our lives. By making sure you both live through this." His voice was hard, cold, the voice of Don Moretti. "Rocco betrayed us. He gave Vito the safe house location. But I got you out. I will always get you out." Isabella made a sound between a laugh and a sob. "Don't you see? This is exactly what I was afraid of. Your world followed us. Your enemies found us. And now Emma's traumatized because she just watched people try to kill her father." She was right. In the mirror, Adriano could see Emma's wide, shell-shocked eyes. His 7-year-old daughter had just survived a massacre, had watched him kill men, had bullets fly past her head. Another piece of her innocence, destroyed by his life. "Where are we going?" Isabella asked, her voice hollow. "Somewhere safe. Somewhere no one knows about. Is there anywhere in this city that's safe from you?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Adriano drove through the night, bleeding, hunted, with his family broken in the back seat. And for the first time in his life, he didn't have an answer. Behind them, the safe house burned. Ahead, Vito waited. And between them, Rocco's betrayal had just torn Adriano's world apart. Adriano dropped Isabella and Emma at Marco's grandmother's house in Queens, a tiny place that wasn't in any database, wasn't connected to the family business, wasn't on anyone's radar. The old woman took one look at the blood and terror and asked no questions, just ushered them inside. "Don't leave this house," Adriano told Isabella. "Marco will guard the door. You see anyone you don't recognize, you run out the back." Isabella grabbed his arm as he turned to go. "Where are you going?" "To end this." "Ade. I can't run anymore, Bella. Not with Rocco feeding Vito information. Not with our daughter's face burned into the memory of 20 different gunmen." His voice was hollow. "The only way you're safe is if he's dead." "And what about you? What about staying alive for Emma?" Adriano looked back at his daughter, who sat wrapped in a blanket on the couch, staring at nothing. Shell-shocked. Traumatized. "If I die, at least she'll be free of this," he said quietly. He left before Isabella could respond. The call came from Tommy an hour later. "Boss, we got something. One of Vito's guys, Flip says Vito's holed up somewhere waiting for news about the safe house hit. He gave us 3 possible locations." "Tell me." Tommy rattled off addresses. A warehouse, a strip club, and then St. Michael's Church on 43rd. The old one that's been closed for 5 years. Adriano's blood went cold. "Say that again." "St. Michael's? It's abandoned, been sitting empty since." "I know what it is." Adriano's hands tightened on the wheel. St. Michael's was where he'd married Isabella 8.5 years ago, standing at the altar in his best suit, watching her walk down the aisle in white. The happiest day of his life. Of course Vito would be there. It was poetic, cruel, exactly the kind of psychological warfare Vito loved. "That's where he is," Adriano said. "I'm going alone." "Boss, that's suicide. At least take." "I said alone." Adriano ended the call. The church rose out of the darkness like a gravestone. St. Michael's had been beautiful once. Gothic architecture, stained glass windows, stone steps worn smooth by decades of faithful feet. Now it was a ruin. The windows were boarded up or broken. Graffiti scarred the walls. The door hung crooked on its hinges. But light flickered inside.
Candlelight.
Adriano checked his gun. Half a clip left. He'd ditched his jacket, his shoulders still bleeding through a makeshift bandage. His ribs screamed with every breath. But he was still standing, still moving. He pushed open the door. The interior took his breath away. Someone, Vito, obviously, had set up candles throughout the church. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, casting dancing shadows across the walls. The pews were still there, but bullet holes riddled the wood. Sections of the ceiling had collapsed. The altar was covered in dust and debris. And standing at that altar, right where the priest had stood 8 years ago, was Vito Leone. He was smaller than Adriano remembered. Mid-50s, graying hair, wearing an expensive suit that looked absurd in the ruined church. He smiled when he saw Adriano, like they were old friends meeting for coffee. "Don Moretti, I was wondering if you'd figured out." Adriano walked slowly down the aisle, his gun at his side. His footsteps echoed in the empty space. "Rocco told you where the safe house was." "Of course he did. I've been paying him for 2 years to feed me information." Vito's smile widened. "You really didn't know? Your most trusted lieutenant, and you never suspected?" "I trusted him." "That was your first mistake." Vito gestured around the church. "Beautiful setting, isn't it? I remembered reading about your wedding in the society pages. Figured it would be fitting for our final meeting." Adriano stopped 10 feet away, gun rising. "You threatened my daughter. I exposed your weakness." "There's a difference." Vito's expression didn't change. "For 20 years, you've been untouchable. No family, no attachments, nothing anyone could use to hurt you."
You were smart about it.
"Brutal, but smart." "Get to the point." "The point is, you can't save a family when you built your kingdom on graves." Vito spread his hands. "Every brick in your empire is mortared with blood. Every dollar you've made came from someone else's suffering. And now you want to play the hero? The loving father? The protective husband? Adriano's finger tightened on the trigger. You're a monster, Moretti.
Just like me. Just like your father before you.
And monsters don't get happy endings. We don't get to ride off into the sunset with our pretty wives and innocent children. We get what we deserve. The gunshot cut through the church, like thunder. Vito's eyes went wide. He looked down at the hole in his chest, blood spreading across his expensive shirt. His mouth worked, trying to form words, but only blood came out. Then I'll end it on one more, Adriano said coldly. Vito collapsed, first to his knees, then forward onto his face. The candles flickered around his body like vigil lights at a funeral. Adriano stood there, gun still raised, waiting to feel something.
Victory.
Relief. Satisfaction. But there was nothing. Just emptiness. He walked to Vito's body, checked for pulse.
Dead.
The man who'd threatened his family, who'd orchestrated the attack, who'd turned Rocco against him. Dead on the floor of the church where Adriano had promised to love and cherish Isabella forever. The irony wasn't lost on him. His phone buzzed.
Marco.
Boss, where are you? We need to talk about Rocco. He's disappeared and… It's done, Adriano interrupted. Vito's dead. Silence on the other end. Then, what about Rocco? I'll deal with him later. Right now, I need you to send cleaners to St. Michael's Church. And then I need you to arrange something for me. What? Adriano looked around the ruined church, at the candles guttering in the darkness, at the blood pooling on the altar steps. He thought about Isabella's words, about Emma's terrified face, about the promise he'd made and broken and was desperately trying to keep. I need you to arrange for Isabella and Emma to leave the city. New identities. Real ones this time. Ones I can't trace. Money, a house somewhere far away, whatever they need to start over. Boss. And I need you to make sure I can never find them again. Marco was quiet for a long moment. You're letting them go. I'm setting them free. Adriano's voice cracked. Make it happen. Tonight. Before I change my mind. He ended the call and stood alone in the church where he'd married the only woman he'd ever loved, with the body of his enemy at his feet and the weight of his choices crushing his chest. Vito was dead, but he'd been right about one thing. Monsters didn't get happy endings. They got what they deserved. And Adriano Moretti deserved to lose everything he loved if it meant they could finally be safe from him. He walked out of the church without looking back, leaving the candles to burn themselves out in the darkness. The coastal town was called Seabrook. Population 3,000. Fishing boats in the harbor, white houses with blue shutters, streets that smelled like salt and possibility. The kind of place where people knew their neighbors and nobody asked too many questions about newcomers looking for a fresh start. Adriano pulled up to a small house 2 blocks from the water, just as dawn began painting the sky pink and gold. He'd been driving for 5 hours. Isabella and Emma had fallen asleep in the back seat somewhere around hour 2, exhausted from terror and adrenaline. He'd driven in silence, watching them in the rearview mirror, memorizing their faces. This would be the last time he'd see them. We're here, he said quietly. Isabella stirred first, blinking in confusion at the unfamiliar surroundings. Then her eyes found the house, a 2-story cottage with a small garden out front, paint freshly done, a swing on the porch. What is this? She whispered. Home. Adriano got out, opened the back door, and carefully lifted Emma into his arms. She mumbled in her sleep, but didn't wake. Let's get her inside. The house was furnished. Marco had worked fast, pulled in every favor, moved at light speed. The living room had a couch and armchairs. The kitchen had dishes in the cabinets and food in the fridge. Upstairs, 2 bedrooms. One with a double bed for Isabella. The other painted yellow with stuffed animals on a child's bed for Emma. Adriano laid his daughter down gently, pulled a blanket over her. She looked so small, so peaceful, like she wasn't carrying the weight of everything she'd seen in the past 48 hours. He stood there for a long moment, just watching her breathe. Ade, Isabella's voice from the doorway. What did you do? What I should have done 8 years ago. He followed her downstairs to the kitchen. On the table, he set down a manila envelope. Everything you need is in there. Birth certificates, social security cards, driver's license. You're Rebecca Walsh now. Emma is Emma Walsh. Your backstory is in there too, where you're from, your work history, all of it. Isabella opened the envelope with shaking hands. The documents looked perfect. Professional. Untraceable. There's a bank account set up in your name, Adriano continued. $500,000. More will be added every month, but it'll be routed through so many channels I won't be able to trace it back to you. Adriano. The house is paid for. Deeds in the envelope. Property taxes are covered for the next 10 years. There's a job lined up for you at the library in town if you want it, but you don't have to work if you don't want to. His words came out mechanical, rehearsed. Like if he stopped talking, he'd break. Emma's enrolled in the elementary school for fall. They think you're a widow relocating for a fresh start. Isabella stared at him. You planned all this? In 5 hours. I've had it planned for 7 years. Since I found out about Emma, he wouldn't meet her eyes. I always knew that one day I might have to let you go for real. So I had contingencies ready. Safe places. New identities. Escape routes. You've been protecting us this whole time. From a distance. The way I should have done from the beginning. Finally, he looked at her. No one knows about this place. Not Marco. Not my remaining men. No one. The paper trail is buried so deep even I can't dig it up. You'll be safe here. Tears ran down Isabella's face. I don't know what to say. Say you'll keep her away from this life. Say you'll let her be normal. His voice broke. Say you'll tell her. Tell her her father loved her. Even if he didn't know how to show it right. Isabella crossed the distance between them and did something she hadn't done in 8 years. She hugged him. Her arms wrapped around his waist, her head against his chest, and for a moment they stood there like they used to, before everything went wrong. I'm sorry, she whispered, for leaving without telling you about Emma, for keeping her from you. Don't, he held her tighter. You were right to leave. You were right about everything. I was drowning you, suffocating you. I just couldn't see it. You're not a monster, Ade. You're a man who was taught the wrong way to love. Maybe. But Emma deserves better than wrong love. He pulled back, looked at her face one more time. If they come looking for me, anyone from the old life, you tell them I'm dead. You tell them Don Adriano Moretti died in a fire or a shooting or whatever makes sense. And you don't look back. And if Emma asks about her father? Isabella's voice trembled. What do I tell her? Adriano was quiet for a long moment. Then, tell her he was a monster who tried to be a man. Isabella's breath hitched. Tell her he made mistakes. That he chose violence when he should have chosen peace. That he hurt people and lost people and broke things that couldn't be fixed. Adriano's eyes were wet now. But tell her that at the end, he tried. He tried to do one good thing. He tried to save the people he loved by walking away. She won't understand. Not now. But maybe someday. He stepped back, breaking the contact. I have to go. It'll be light soon. Wait, Isabella grabbed his hand. Just wait. Let me wake her. Let her say goodbye. Every instinct screamed at him to refuse. To leave now, quick and clean, before his resolve crumbled. But he couldn't. He couldn't leave his daughter without saying goodbye. They went upstairs together. Isabella gently shook Emma awake. Baby, wake up. Someone wants to say goodbye. Emma's eyes opened, found Adriano standing in the doorway. She sat up, still groggy. Daddy. The word hit him like a bullet. He crossed to the bed, knelt down so they were eye level. Hey, sweetheart. Where are we? Your new home. You and Mommy are going to live here. It's safe. It's quiet. You can go to school, make friends, be a regular kid. Emma's eyes widened. Are you staying too? No, baby, he touched her cheek with one scarred hand. I have to go away for a while. How long? Forever. I don't know. But you'll visit, right? You'll come see me? Adriano felt his heart crack in half. I'll try, Emma. But I might not be able to. My work is. It's dangerous. And I need to keep you safe. Emma's lip trembled. But you just found me. We just met. I know. He pulled her into a hug, held her tight. She smelled like strawberry shampoo and innocence. I know, and I'm so sorry. But sometimes daddies have to do hard things to protect their little girls. I don't want you to go, Emma started crying. Please don't go. Adriano kissed her forehead, then her cheeks, then her forehead again, trying to memorize the feeling. You be good for your mom, okay? You study hard in school. You make friends. You have a normal, happy life. Will I see you again? He wanted to say yes. Wanted to promise her they'd be together again. But he'd made too many promises he couldn't keep. I love you, Emma. More than anything in this world, he stood, his vision blurred with tears. Don't forget that. He turned and walked out before he could change his mind. Before he could stay. Before his selfish need to be near his daughter destroyed what little chance she had at a normal life. Isabella followed him to the door. Take care of her, he said. Always. She squeezed his hand once. And, Ade, thank you for letting us go. He walked to his car as the sun broke over the horizon, painting everything gold. Behind him, he could hear Emma crying, Isabella comforting her. A family he'd never really had, saying goodbye to a man who'd never learned how to stay. Adriano Moretti drove away from his daughter, from his last chance at redemption, from everything he'd ever wanted. And he didn't look back. Because if he did, he'd turn around. And that would destroy them all. 3 weeks later, the morning news played quietly in the kitchen while Isabella made breakfast. Emma sat at the table, coloring a picture of the ocean. They'd been in Seabrook for 21 days now. 3 weeks of normal. 3 weeks of peace. 3 weeks of Emma asking when Daddy was coming back. Local news now, the TV anchor said. In a shocking development, authorities have confirmed the death of alleged crime boss Adriano Moretti. Moretti, who is believed to be the head of one of the city's most powerful organized crime families, was killed in an explosion at a warehouse in the industrial district. Sources say the blast occurred during what appears to have been a confrontation with rival faction leader Rocco DeLuca, who also perished in the fire. Isabella's spatula clattered into the sink. Emma looked up from her coloring. Mommy? The explosion destroyed most of the evidence, the anchor continued, but dental records and DNA recovered from the scene have been confirmed as belonging to Moretti. The FBI, which has been investigating Moretti for over a decade, released a statement saying this marks the end of an era for organized crime in the city. Isabella's hand found the remote, fingers trembling. She turned off the TV. The silence was deafening. Emma slid off her chair, walked over, and wrapped her arms around her mother's legs. Was that about Daddy? Isabella looked down at her daughter's upturned face. Those brown eyes, Adriano's eyes, searching for answers to questions too big for a 7-year-old to understand. Yes, baby. Is he really gone? Isabella knelt down, pulled Emma close. She thought about the man who'd saved them, who'd given them everything, and then walked away, who'd loved them enough to let them go. Your daddy did what he promised, Isabella whispered. He kept us safe. Emma buried her face in her mother's shoulder and cried. Not for a father she barely knew, but for the one she'd hoped to know. For the future she'd imagined, now gone up in smoke and lies. Isabella held her daughter and let her own tears fall silently, mixing grief with relief with guilt. Adriano was either dead or so deep underground he might as well be. Either way, he was gone from their lives. The monster who'd tried to be a man. The man who'd succeeded in the end. Portland, Oregon, same moment. The pier stretched into the Pacific like a finger pointing toward freedom. Adriano walked slowly along the weathered boards, hands in his pockets, collar turned up against the wind. He looked different now. Beard grown out, hair longer, a scar on his cheek from the explosion he'd barely escaped. His eyes were hidden behind sunglasses, but they carried the same weight they always had. Heavier now, if that was possible. He was James Carroll now. At least, that's what his ID said. James Carroll from Montana, software consultant, recently relocated to Portland for work. Alone. No family. No past worth mentioning. The explosion at the warehouse had been Marco's idea. A way to end Don Adriano Moretti without actually ending him. They'd planted evidence, staged the scene, made it convincing enough that even the FBI believed it. Rocco's body. Actually Rocco's body, because Adriano had found him and finished what needed finishing, had been identified alongside dental records from a corpse they'd borrowed from a morgue. In death, Adriano Moretti was finally free. In life, James Carroll was utterly alone. He stopped at the end of the pier, watching fishing boats bob in the harbor. Seagulls cried overhead. The air smelled like salt and fish and new beginnings. Other people walked past, couples holding hands, kids laughing, people living normal lives. He'd never be one of them. Couldn't be, even with a new name and a clean slate. The blood on his hands was permanent, invisible but indelible. 20 years of violence didn't wash off just because you faked your death and grew a beard. But Emma would never know that. Emma would grow up thinking her father died, trying to protect them. She'd go to school, make friends, have birthday parties and soccer games and normal teenage drama. She'd never walk into a room and smell gunpowder. Never see her father beat a man half to death. Never have to choose between loving him and being terrified of him. That was worth it. Worth everything. In his pocket, his phone buzzed. A text from an untraceable number. Marco probably checking in. But Adriano didn't look. He told Marco to delete his number, to never contact him again. Whatever that text said, it didn't matter anymore. The Moretti family was Marco's now. The empire, the soldiers, the blood. Let him have it. Adriano pulled out a piece of paper from his other pocket. A letter he'd written but would never send. He'd carried it for 3 weeks, reading it over and over, the words etched into his memory. Bella, I took lives for power, built an empire on graves and called it success. I lost you for pride, too stubborn to see that holding tight meant letting go. For 20 years, I believed strength meant never backing down, never showing weakness, never admitting I was wrong. Then Emma ran into my cafe crying for help, and everything I thought I knew shattered. In her eyes, I saw what I could have been, if I'd met Mercy sooner. If I'd learned that real strength is walking away. If I'd understood that loving someone means setting them free, even when it destroys you. I don't expect forgiveness. Don't expect understanding. I just hope that someday, when Emma's old enough, you'll tell her that her father tried. That at the end, when it mattered most, he chose her over everything else he'd built. I'll carry you both with me forever. The family I had for 3 days and loved for a lifetime. Be happy, Bella. Give Emma the life I never could. A ghost who used to be a man. The wind picked up, tugging at the paper. Adriano held it for one more moment, then let it go. The letter tumbled away, carried on the breeze, dancing over the water before settling on the surface and slowly sinking beneath the waves. Taking his words, his regrets, his love down into the deep where it belonged. He stood there as the sun climbed higher, warming his face. Somewhere, hundreds of miles away, his daughter was learning to ride a bike. His ex-wife was unpacking boxes in a yellow kitchen. They were building a life without him. And that life would be beautiful. Adriano Moretti was dead, buried under lies and explosions and 20 years of bad choices. James Carroll was free. Free but hollow. Free but haunted. Free to walk away from the pier and disappear into a city where nobody knew his name or his sins. He took one last look at the ocean, vast and endless and indifferent to human suffering. Then he turned and walked away. Behind him, the waves continued their eternal rhythm, washing away footprints, erasing evidence, promising that eventually, even the deepest wounds would heal. Even his. Someday.